Hello, this video is going to show you how to identify the latitude and longitude for a location on a map and the township and range using 7.5-minute topographic maps. The first thing we'll cover is latitude and longitude. And to discuss latitude and longitude, it's helpful to have a little bit of context. Looking at a world map, you can see that the latitude, which are the lines that go up and down like a ladder, these are broken out into north and south. In this map, you can see that there are negative values that indicate the southern portion and positive values that indicate the northern portion. On the maps that we're looking at, they don't show negative or positive values, but it is important when you're entering latitude and longitude into other programs like GPS coordinates, you may need to include a negative number if you are in one of these portions of the Earth that have negative latitude or longitude. So let's say we're in North America and we are going to be in the northern hemisphere. When we look at our line in the middle, which is the prime meridian, then we have east and western longitudes. So we have in the United States, we have negative longitudes, and those longitudes increase as you go west. So it's always important to keep a context in mind from a big picture is that if you're looking over here in the western United States, then you're going to be somewhere around negative, from between 125 negative and 115 negative. So those are the general numbers you'll expect to see from your longitude, and from your latitude, you're going to expect to see latitude somewhere between 50 and 35. Now let's take a look at how this plays out when you're looking at a 7.5-minute quadrangle. So the first thing that I'd like to point out here is that this map is 7.5 minutes by 7.5 minutes, but you'll notice that it's a rectangle. This map comes from Central California, and the reason that it is a rectangle and not a square, but it's still 7.5 minutes, is that as you go up in latitude, the distance between these minutes are different as the Earth narrows toward the top. So let's look at where these numbers exist on our map. We've got corner, so up here at the top, we've got 40 degrees, 7 minutes, and 30 seconds. And the reason that we know this one is the latitude is because at the top over here, you'll see that we've got the same one, 40 degrees, 7 minutes, 30 seconds. And when we go to the bottom corner, we can see that that number changes. So now we've identified which of these numbers is the latitude, which is the longitude. So the latitude is the number that is 40. And if we go back to our map, that makes sense. So we know that the number, if we're in the Western United States, we should have a number around 40. So always check with your brain on these numbers. It tends to help you out. So now we have these other numbers at the bottom. Those are our longitudes. So we're in 120 degrees, 45 minutes, and 0 seconds over here. And over here, we've got that change of 37 and 30 seconds. Okay, so let's talk about these minutes and second business. These are similar to a clock, you would say, where it is broken out by minutes and seconds, and there are 60 seconds in a minute, and there are 60 minutes in a degree. And what that means is that when you're looking at the side of your map and you're trying to figure out if you are at a location here, let's say by the end of this creek, and you're trying to figure out where that was, you need to have some kind of an idea of the breakpoints between these numbers. So let's start to take a look at the numbers on the side. There's a lot of numbers going on here. All right, so we've identified already that 40 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds, this is our latitude. And so as we're going up, we're looking for those changes. And we see here, this is, again, 40 degrees. It's not listed here, but it's implied. 40 degrees, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. So what are these numbers in between? Those are really confusing. Those are called UTM numbers, Universal Traverse Mercator. We're not covering that in this video, but those are another way to find your location on a map, and a way that you actually might find quite helpful as well. So you might have to look for another resource for those UTMs. Regardless, for here, we're doing latitude and longitude. So Okay, up here we've got 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and down here we have 0. So we've got some kind of a breakpoint to go in here. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So the first thing that I would want to do here, if I wanted to find the location of the headwaters of this creek, is I would want to take the distance between 40 degrees and 0 minutes and seconds and put some breakpoints between there. So I would take a pencil, or I would take some type of a marker to show, or just keep an eyeball that where these breakpoints for minutes would be. So if I've got a minute roughly here and another minute roughly here, and then 30 seconds above that. So I'm going to find for this quadrangle what my breakpoints roughly are for the space between these two numbers. So if it looks like my headwaters are right down here, it looks like that's going to be a little bit under 1 minute. And so I might say that my latitude is 40 degrees, 0 minutes, and since it's almost a full minute, I would say that it's 50 seconds. So that 50 seconds, that's going to bring me up toward here. And so that could be my latitude. Now, latitude is only going to get me half of the way there. That's going to show that I'm in the lower portion of the map. But I also want to know my longitude. And so again, going for that same method where I take my longitude, and here we've got 120 degrees, 37 minutes, and 30 seconds. And let me find my other indicator here so I know my breakpoints. Okay, so there's 40, that would be 120 degrees, 42 minutes, and 30 seconds. And so between those two markers, oh, there's another one, 40 degrees. Okay, that's a little bit closer. So between these two, again, I've got 2.5 minutes being covered. And so I'm going to take that same concept and I'm going to say what looks like about a minute here, and another minute, probably actually a minute closer to here, and another minute here, and then this is a half a minute after that. So if I use those general breakpoints, it looks like my the headwaters of this creek are somewhere between 1 and 2 minutes. And so we'll say I would estimate this as 120 degrees, 30, and probably 39 minutes and 0 seconds. And so I would bring that up, and because that creek is really halfway between the marker for 40 minutes and 37.5 minutes. And so I'm going to say that that's 39. So that would mean that my latitude would be 40 degrees, 0 minutes, 50 seconds, and my longitude would be 120 degrees, 39 minutes, and 0 seconds. And that's going to get you in a ballpark. Now, the other method for identifying your location on a map is Township and Range, or the Public Land Survey System. And what you'll see is that in a lot of ways, the Public Land Survey System makes a lot more sense for doing what we're doing here, which is identifying your location on a map. Latitude and longitude, it's pretty challenging. There's not a whole lot of guide maps or guide lines on the side. And these Public Land Survey Systems make it a lot more convenient to do that if you were just using a paper map. Of course, if you're using GPS technology, then using latitude and longitude is a great way to get you close to those things. So it's nice to have a couple different tools in your tool belt to be able to figure out your location, depending on what resources you've got. So Township and Range. The concept behind Township and Range is that this is the way that our land ownership was delineated back in the day. And again, you can find lots of resources on the history of Township and Range. The point here is how we're going to read it on a map. So again, kind of zooming out just to see what kind of lay of land we've got here. We've got all these red lines, these red straight lines, and you can see that we have some kind of a pattern. So if I'm looking at this map, I recognize that I've got alignment of the lines. There seems to be a line in the center here, and I've got a cluster of squares that seem to be in alignment in this this bottom right portion. And so my suspicion is that I've got a breakpoint of a township and range over here, and that this line in between that's in the middle is probably where it changes from one range to another, and this line right here in the middle of the map is probably where it changes from one township to another. And so what you'll see if you're looking at aerial imagery is a lot of these grids are associated with different ownerships, because this is how our ownership is delineated in many states in the United States. All right, so when we zoom in here, let's say we're looking at our same location here at the headwaters of this creek. And I'd like to know, first of all, my township and range. And looks like I'm down here already, so I've got my range located. So on the edge of this line, I've got range 12 east. And so that's my range, and let's see where I can find my township. Scroll up here. Oh, here we are. Township is township 25 north. So my township 25 north, my range 12 east. And so think about what this looks like when you're communicating to somebody and you say, I'm located in township 25 north, range 12 east. And so they're able to zone in on those township and ranges with that first step. And for this example, we are at the headwaters of this creek. Now, sometimes you end up like we have here, where we're right between these two. So if we were going to decide that the headwaters started over here, right in section 21, and if we were in section 21 of township 25 north, range 12 east, that gets us somewhat close. But again, if let's say we're directing somebody to hike here or to drive here, that wouldn't really get them close enough. So we have a couple different ways to delineate a little bit more detailed to get closer to our location in this section. So first, a couple details about sections. These section edges are each a mile. Some of them, as you might see, have slightly different sizes. There's never any like solid rules in mapping. Well, what that is helpful for is that when you look down at your scale bar here, you can see here's 1 mile for your scale bar, and here's 1 mile against that section line. This is really helpful when you're trying to determine distances on a map, and can be really useful as its own independent scale bar. Equally helpful is that a section is a total of 640 acres. And so what that is helpful for, again, when you're looking at a map, is that you can identify roughly how much area you're looking at. If you've got a feature that's on a map that you want to identify its size, like a fire, then you can help identify the size of the fire based on what portion of that section it's taking up. Okay, so we've got our township, we've got our range, and now we get a little bit tricky here. So the way that we report more detailed elements for township and range is by sections and quarter sections and quarter sections. So here's our section 21, and if I just wanted to get people to the quarter section, then I would divide this in 4, and I would identify that the headwaters of my creek is going to be in the northwest corner. So if that's not enough, though, because in that northwest corner there's still 160 acres to deal with there, so it's not very narrowed in. And I want to give people a little bit more specific direction and give them the quarter. So what we have here is we're actually going to be working backward. So in this case, we identify township, we identify range, and then we identify the quarter section. In this case, the quarter section for this area is the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter, and that is the more specific location of this section 21. So if I were to write this out, I would write it out as township 25 north, range 12 east, section 21, southwest quarter of the northwest quarter. And then I would be able to communicate that location to somebody, and they could zone in on it on the map and find their way to it.